The old piano sat forgotten in the corner of the faculty lounge, a relic of bygone days. Dr. Eleanor Chen paused beside it, fingers hovering over dusty keys. Her colleagues had never heard her play, never guessed that the quiet math professor once sold out concert halls across Europe. Today, that carefully guarded secret would either save her career or destroy it completely. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. The lecture hall buzzed with anticipation. Students shuffled papers and whispered as Dr. Eleanor Chen arranged her notes at the podium. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air. Today we'll continue our exploration of combinatorial theory, Eleanor began, her voice soft but clear. At 42, she was unremarkable by Westfield University. Standards, medium height, practical clothing, hair pulled back in a simple knot. Nothing about her suggested brilliance or noteworthiness, just another mid-level academic in the prestigious mathematics department. From the back row, Professor James Harrington observed with thinly veiled contempt. As department chair and recent recipient of the Fields Medal, he commanded respect without effort. His tailored suits, confident stride, and practiced charm opening doors Eleanor could barely approach. "Dr. Chen," he interrupted, rising from his seat, "I hope you don't mind my observation today. Potential donors are interested in our teaching methods." Eleanor's hand trembled slightly. Of course not. She'd been passed over for promotion 3 times despite stellar student evaluations and solid research. Harrington made sure of that. His fundraising prowess made him untouchable. "Please continue," he said, with an exaggerated gesture. Eleanor resumed her lecture, explaining complex mathematical concepts while Harrington made a show of checking his watch. Several students noticed his dismissive attitude. By the time she finished, her confidence had visibly eroded. "Interesting approach," Harrington announced as students filed out, "though perhaps a bit elementary for our caliber of institution." "My methods help students grasp difficult concepts," Eleanor replied. "Yes, well," Harrington smiled tightly, "that's one perspective. I've scheduled a department meeting tomorrow. We'll be discussing curriculum optimization. Do try to prepare something substantial." As he left, whispers followed. The message was clear. Eleanor Chen didn't belong. She gathered her papers silently, face burning. In her 15 years at Westfield, she'd never learned to navigate its politics, had never wanted to. Numbers were honest. People rarely were. "Don't let him get to you," said May, her graduate assistant. "Your lectures are the best in the department." Eleanor managed a small smile. "Thanks, May." What she didn't say was that this pattern was becoming unbearable. What she didn't say was that 20 years ago, her hands had created magic that brought audiences to their feet across 3 continents. What she didn't say was that she was getting very, very tired of hiding. The department meeting the next afternoon was worse than Eleanor had anticipated. Faculty members filled the conference room, with Harrington presiding at the head of the polished table. "We're evaluating teaching assignments for next semester," he announced. "Dr. Chen, your advanced course has lower enrollment than projected." Eleanor straightened. "Numbers are slightly down, but student engagement is high. Their project work, numbers matter," Harrington interrupted. "Especially to the Board of Trustees. Dr. Lawson has proposed a fascinating new approach to the curriculum. Keith, would you share your ideas?" Keith Lawson, Harrington's protege, launched into a presentation that essentially repackaged Eleanor's teaching methods under a different name. She watched in disbelief as colleagues nodded approvingly. "This is remarkably similar to what I've been implementing for 3 years," Eleanor finally said. Harrington's smile was predatory. "Great minds, I suppose, though Dr. Lawson's approach includes quantifiable metrics and innovative assessment tools, which are identical to the ones I developed," Eleanor added. "Perhaps you misremember," Lawson suggested with false sympathy. "Your contributions have been modest." Several colleagues shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. "I have documentation," Eleanor insisted. "My course materials—" "We should move on," Harrington cut in. "Time is limited." Now regarding the Whitmore Foundation grant, the conversation shifted. Eleanor's concerns dismissed. She sat through the remainder of the meeting in humiliated silence, fury building quietly beneath her calm exterior. Later, in the faculty lounge, she overheard Lawson speaking to younger colleagues. "Chen's old school," he was saying. "Can't adapt to modern methods. Harrington's trying to be kind, but honestly, she should probably retire and make room for fresh talent." Eleanor's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. She had published 4 papers last year, had mentored 6 graduate students to successful dissertations, had developed 2 new courses that were now being stolen right in front of her, and she was only 42. "Is that your professional assessment, Dr. Lawson?" she asked, turning slowly. The lounge fell silent. Lawson flushed, but recovered quickly. "Just an observation, Eleanor," he said. "No offense intended." "Of course not," she replied. "Just as I intend no offense when I observe that your innovative methods are remarkably identical to materials I presented at last year's conference." Harrington appeared in the doorway, his timing impeccable. "Problems, colleagues?" "Not at all." Lawson recovered smoothly. "Dr. Chen is concerned about overlap in our teaching approaches. Intellectual collaboration is the lifeblood of academia," Harrington said magnanimously, "though some concepts are simply in the academic ether, waiting to be recognized by those with sufficient insight." Several colleagues chuckled. Eleanor felt something shift inside her, a quiet certainty that had been building for months. "The annual faculty showcase is this weekend," Harrington continued. "A perfect opportunity to demonstrate Westfield's excellence to donors and trustees. Lawson, your presentation on computational approaches is highlighted in the program." "I've been preparing for weeks," Lawson confirmed. "And Dr. Chen," Harrington added with exaggerated politeness, "perhaps you could help with refreshments." The silence in the room was deafening. Eleanor set down her coffee cup with unnatural precision. Actually, I'd like to participate in the showcase." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The program is quite full. Major donors expect certain standards." "I understand," Eleanor replied. "But the showcase traditionally includes cultural elements. I notice no one has signed up for the musical interlude this year." "You play an instrument?" Lawson asked incredulously. "I do," Eleanor said simply. Harrington looked annoyed. "The showcase highlights professional capabilities, not amateur hobbies." "I assure you, I'm qualified," Eleanor said. "Let her play," suggested Dr. Yamamoto from engineering. "Might be a nice change from the usual presentations." Harrington evaluated the room's response, recognizing he couldn't refuse without appearing petty. "Very well," he conceded. 5 minutes at the beginning, something appropriate, nothing too ambitious." "Thank you," Eleanor said, turned, and left the lounge with measured steps. In her office, she closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. 20 years since she'd performed publicly. 20 years since she'd walked away from concert halls and recording contracts. She flexed her fingers. They remembered. The night of the faculty showcase arrived with perfect early autumn weather. Westfield's Grand Hall was filled with faculty, administrators, board members, and wealthy donors. Elegant arrangements of flowers decorated tables laden with champagne and canapes. Eleanor arrived early, wearing a simple black dress that was a far cry from her usual practical attire. She had styled her hair differently too, looser framing. "Her face, Dr. Chen," Harrington greeted her with obvious surprise. "I almost didn't recognize you. The piano has been tuned, though I'm not certain it's up to performance standards." "I'm sure it will be fine," Eleanor replied. 5 minutes, he reminded her. "We have important presentations to get to." The Grand Hall filled quickly. Eleanor recognized several major donors, including Victoria Wellington, whose family name adorned the mathematics building. Harrington worked the room masterfully, steering important guests toward Lawson and other favored faculty members. At precisely 7 o'clock, Harrington approached the podium. "Welcome to Westfield University's annual faculty showcase," he began. "We have an extraordinary program highlighting groundbreaking research across disciplines. But first, a brief musical interlude from Dr. Eleanor Chen of our mathematics department." His emphasis on brief was unmistakable. Smattering applause followed as Eleanor approached the baby grand piano positioned at the side of the stage. She sat, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. 20 years melted away in an instant. The room stilled as the opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 filled the air, not the simplified version, but the full, technically demanding original. Eleanor's fingers moved with absolute precision, creating cascades of notes that built upon each other in mathematical perfection. The piece was famously one of the most difficult in the classical repertoire. Few pianists mastered it. Even fewer played it with the emotional depth Eleanor now displayed, her body swaying slightly, eyes closed, completely immersed in the music she created. The audience sat stunned. Harrington's mouth fell open slightly before he controlled his expression. Lawson stared in naked disbelief. Eleanor played not for 5 minutes, but for 15, lost in the complex harmonies and demanding passages. The music built to its thunderous climax, her fingers flying across keys with impossible speed and accuracy, before resolving in the gentle, haunting final notes. Silence held for 3 heartbeats after the final note faded. Then the room erupted. The audience rose to their feet, applause thunderous in the grand hall. Victoria Wellington was the first standing, tears streaming down her face. Board members who had barely acknowledged Eleanor's existence now strained to see her better. Eleanor rose from the bench and offered a simple bow. Her face was flushed, eyes bright with unshed tears. She had forgotten the pure joy of performing, of letting that part of herself breathe free after so many years. That was, Harrington stammered as she passed him, unexpected. Mathematics and music are intimately connected, Eleanor replied softly. Structure, pattern, emotion, they're different expressions of the same language. Victoria Wellington approached, brushing past Harrington. Dr. Chen, that was extraordinary, truly world-class. I had no idea we had such talent in our mathematics department. Thank you, Eleanor replied. It's been many years since I performed publicly. You must have trained professionally, Wellington continued, fascinated. Juilliard, Eleanor admitted, before I pursued mathematics. Harrington had recovered enough to insert himself into the conversation. Dr. Chen is full of surprises. Now, if I could direct your attention to our main presentations. In a moment, Wellington said firmly. Dr. Chen, would you join me for lunch next week? I'm chairing a new initiative to integrate arts and sciences at Westfield. Your perspective would be invaluable. Harrington's face flushed red. Mrs. Wellington, Dr. Lawson has been developing a similar concept. Has he mastered Rachmaninoff? Has well? Wellington asked dryly. Throughout the remainder of the evening, faculty members who had never given Eleanor a second glance now approached with congratulations and questions. Donors requested introductions. Lawson maintained a sickly smile, while Harrington worked desperately to redirect attention to the scheduled presentations. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. In 15 minutes, Eleanor had transformed from invisible to unforgettable. As the event concluded, May found her by the refreshment table. You never told me, the graduate student accused, though her eyes were shining with admiration. It wasn't relevant to our work, Eleanor replied. It changes everything. May insisted. Do you realize Harrington is in damage control mode? I heard him telling trustees that he's been mentoring you specifically. Eleanor couldn't help but laugh. That's creative historical revision. Why did you hide this part of yourself? May asked. You could have been the department star. Eleanor considered the question carefully. I wanted my work in mathematics to stand on its own merit, not as a novelty, the pianist who does equations. But you gave up so much, May persisted. Did I? Eleanor tilted her head. I chose the path that called to me most strongly. I never stopped playing. I just played for myself. Across the room, she caught Harrington watching her, his expression unreadable. He nodded almost imperceptibly before turning away. The following Monday, Eleanor arrived at her office to find it surrounded by students, more than she'd ever seen outside of class. Time. Dr. Chen, one called out, is it true you were a concert pianist? Were you really on tour in Europe? My sister's in the music department and said you could have been playing at Carnegie Hall. Eleanor smiled despite herself. I think that's enough. Gossip for one morning. Office hours start at 10. Inside, she found a note on her desk requesting her presence in the dean's office at 11. Beneath it was a second envelope, heavier paper, expensive, with Victoria Wellington's monogram. The note inside reads simply, "The Westwood Foundation is establishing 5 new endowed chairs. I've taken the liberty of putting your name forward to the selection committee. Lunch tomorrow? VW." Eleanor sat at her desk, thoughts spinning. One public performance had changed the perception of everyone around her, yet she was still the same person, still the dedicated teacher, still the careful researcher, still the woman who preferred numbers to networking. The life she'd built after walking away from music was solid and meaningful. She hadn't been unhappy, just increasingly frustrated with Harrington's systematic dismissal of her contributions. Now opportunities were suddenly appearing. The question was, what would she do with them? The meeting with the dean was brief, but transformative. Harrington was present, but unusually subdued. The curriculum optimization was shelved. Eleanor's advanced course was reinstated with increased funding, and she was appointed to the prestigious University Arts Committee, a position Harrington had coveted for years. "Your unique background bridges disciplines in exactly the way Westfield aspires to," the dean explained. Mrs. Wellington was quite insistent. As they left the meeting, Harrington fell into step beside her in the hallway. "Impressive performance," he said finally, "in every sense." "Thank you," Eleanor replied neutrally. "Why mathematics?" he asked abruptly. "With your talent, you could have had a distinguished career in music." Eleanor considered the question. "Because mathematics challenges me in ways music never did. Because I wanted to build something lasting. Because I love it." "You could have mentioned your background," Harrington persisted. "It would have changed perspectives." "Would it have changed your perspective, Professor Harrington? Or would you have seen it as irrelevant to serious academic work?" He had no answer for that. "I've never been interested in leveraging one talent to gain advantage in another field," she continued. "My work stands on its own merits, or it should." Harrington looked away. "The dean has asked me to collaborate with you on the Wellington Initiative." "I know. It could be productive." Eleanor smiled slightly. "It could be. If we both approach it with genuine respect for what each brings to the table." For the first time, Harrington seemed to truly see her, not as an obstacle or an inconvenience, but as a colleague with dimensions he'd failed to recognize. "I'll see you at the committee meeting on Thursday," she said, and continued down the ECU hallway alone. 6 months later, Eleanor sat at the piano in her living room, playing softly as evening fell. The Wellington Initiative for Interdisciplinary Excellence had launched successfully. Her advanced course was now the department's most requested, and next semester she would teach a new seminar examining the mathematical structures underlying musical composition. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find May holding a bottle of champagne. "It's official," the young woman announced, striding in. The grant was approved, full funding for 5 years. Eleanor smiled. The research project they'd developed, combining mathematical modeling with musical pattern analysis to create new pedagogical approaches, had just secured its future. "We should celebrate," May insisted, heading for the kitchen to find glasses. "We should," Eleanor agreed. "But first," she sat at the piano again, patting the bench beside her. "I'm teaching you the basics. Every mathematician should understand. Music from the inside." "I have zero talent," May protested. "Talent is overrated," Eleanor replied. "Persistence matters more. I didn't become a pianist overnight, and I didn't become a mathematician overnight either." As she guided May through simple scales, Eleanor reflected on the changes of the past months. Her revelation hadn't solved everything. Some colleagues still resented her new prominence. Harrington remained competitive, though now with grudging respect. But she no longer hid parts of herself, no longer accepted being overlooked, no longer waited for permission to fully exist in spaces she had earned through double the effort. The most profound change was internal, a reconciliation of the different threads of her life into a single, harmonious whole: music and mathematics. Passion and precision, individual achievement and collaborative creation. "This is hopeless," May laughed after a particularly mangled attempt at a simple melody. "Nothing worthwhile is easy," Eleanor replied, "and nothing valuable is achieved alone. Remember that when you're teaching your own students someday." As night fell, they abandoned the piano lesson in favor of champagne and conversation about their research. Tomorrow would bring classes and meetings and the 100 small battles that academic life entailed. But tonight, in the gentle darkness of her home, with music still lingering in the air, Eleanor Chen was completely, authentically herself, no longer divided, no longer diminished. The truest talent she had finally learned was the courage to be fully seen,